who is universally loved, but actually an asshole. Old reference, but, Gary Berghoff aka Radar from MASH. Apparently he was notoriously hard to work with and generally an asshole to the movie and show cast and crew, but his character was so beloved that viewers never thought he was like that. On the flip side, poor Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns, was known to be an extremely nice guy, but got sneered at and generally treated like crap by the public due to his character in the show. Just goes to show you should separate the art from the artist. It's become public knowledge now, but Ellen DeGeneres. I met her, briefly, while working events at Universal Studios FL. Back in the mid-2000s she would on occasion film her talk show on location at Universal. My job would call for me to interact with Ellen and her crew for prepping and crowd control measures. There were two occasions that raised an eyebrow. First was behind set. The show was getting ready to start and I went back to tell her crew that we were ready for her to make her way to the stage where her show was being recorded. When I walked back there I saw Ellen yelling at a crew member, inches from his face. She was belittling him and threatened to leave him in FL. Second occasion was brief but impactful. One of my coworkers was standing somewhat close to her, back to back with her. Ellen turned around, looked at her with a look of disbelief and after a couple seconds said, "Aren't you just an invader of space?" She scoffed and walked away. We were both looking at each other thinking WTF is her problem. So for all those years I always thought of her as a phony while all of America loved her. I was not surprised when all those stories of her being awful to work with came to light. I already had experienced it. Not sure if they are universally loved, but I used to work in restaurants for the House of Mouse, and both Howie Mandel and Bobby McFerrin were total jerks. Acted like they were completely above everyone else and both of them let their bratty kids run screaming around the restaurant. Always smart when people carrying hot trays of food are everywhere. I had a lot of positive celebrity interactions, but those two were awful. Can't stand to listen to Don't Worry, Be Happy since. Rachel Ray. Loved her show. Until I went to see her live. In between takes she was a very not nice person. John Stamos helped his friend rape someone and was still bragging about it decades later. I don't think he's famous enough to be universally loved but Mitch Albom, aka the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, hosted him at an author event for a small venue and he was fucking furious that the event was so beneath him. Was furious we didn't have a plate of fresh fruit for him. He didn't have a rider or anything demanding we have fruit at the ready, just expected us to know. Was furious that more people didn't show up to fawn over him. Was just generally furious. Instead of talking about his book during the lecture, he spent 20 minutes taking a steaming dump over the staff, venue, and audience. Ironic given the subject of his books. Edit. The only person we shit-talked more was J.A. Jatz, who writes a handful of detective series and one inexplicable collection of poems. She loved doing events at our place and was there every 6 months to promote her newest book. She had a huge and devoted following which baffled me because her events are insane. She once spent an entire hour singing for the audience, not well. When we tried to tell her we were now closing, she sort of waved grandly to her adoring fans and said not until these people have heard me talk about my books, and then kept us open an additional hour while she mostly didn't talk about her book. She also always demanded we had copies of her poetry book on hand despite the fact that no one wanted it and we could rarely even get copies from the publisher. Once we even wound up buying some from a discount bin at Costco just so we could technically have some on hand. Martha Stewart. I witnessed her call her assistant and I quote, a worthless piece of shit. No one should be called that for accidentally dropping her handbag. Edit. I also offered Martha a bottle of Fiji water and she said she only drinks Voss. Steve Jobs. It's pretty well known that he was a giant asshole, but he's still pretty romanticized in the tech sphere. Bill Nye. Everyone I've ever talked with who met him has terrible stories. He's just a grumpy and mean asshole. From what my fiancé told me is that Beyoncé is extremely entitled and rude to people. He worked in a restaurant where many celebrities would go to and he loved most of them but absolutely hated Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Tommy Lee Jones, shared an elevator in New Orleans last year, said, "Mr. Jones, I'm a huge fan and I love your work." He said, "Mind your own fucking business, asshole." Exactly. Tim Allen lived near me for a while. Always a pompous ass. However, the gentleman who plays Gus Fring on Breaking Bad is a real good guy. Remembered my name and says hi to me when we run into each other at Whole Foods. He also tipped the cashier at WF $100 just because. Steve Harvey. For those who want to know, watch his interviews on women and atheists. He's cheated on his wives, physically abusive, acts like religion is the only thing that between him and killing and raping people. From personal experience, Bill Nye was an absolute asshole from my interaction with him. It was perhaps the saddest moment of Don't Meet Your Heroes in my life. Jimmy Savile. Was loved. Died. Found out he was a child predator. This question needs an explain your answer added to the end.